Men are taught to seek approval. Neediness destroys mystery and respect. Women quickly sense emotional dependence. The problem isn't love, it's emotional hunger. The less a man needs validation, the stronger he becomes. Comment: no more confusions. Number 1. He has his own life. The moment a man stops building his world around her, everything changes because she can no longer predict him, control his emotions, or use attention as leverage over his mind, and that is exactly the kind of man she secretly respects, even if she never admits it out loud, because so many men today wake up thinking about her first, checking their phone first, waiting for a message first, wondering why her energy changed, wondering why she suddenly acts cold after once acting obsessed, and little by little they lose themselves trying to keep a woman interested, while their own goals, health, peace, and purpose slowly disappear in the background. And she notices this immediately because women pay attention to emotional dependence faster than men realize. She watches how quickly you reply, how easily your mood changes when she pulls away, how much access she has to your emotions, and once she sees that your happiness depends on her attention, she slowly stops respecting you, because in her mind a man who cannot stand on his own without constant validation becomes emotionally weak no matter how kind or loyal he is. And this is why so many men sit confused, trying to understand why she lost interest after they gave her everything, because they believe love means sacrifice while she sees desperation. They believe constant attention proves loyalty while she sees a lack of self-control. They believe making her the center of their life will make her value them, while in reality it often does the complete opposite, because she starts asking herself a dangerous question without even saying it directly. What does this man have besides me? And the moment she realizes the answer is not much, she slowly disconnects emotionally while he sits there trying harder, texting more, over-explaining more, giving more chances, tolerating more disrespect, and abandoning himself more every single day, hoping she will suddenly appreciate his effort, but she rarely does because people value what has purpose outside of them. And this is why the man who has his own life instantly becomes different, because his happiness is not sitting in her hands. He wakes up with direction, he trains his body, focuses on his money, sharpens his mind, protects his peace, handles his responsibilities, and moves through life with discipline whether she stays or leaves. And that changes everything, because now she cannot shake him so easily anymore. She cannot ruin his entire day with one cold reply. She cannot control his self-worth through attention, because his identity no longer depends on her approval, and men need to understand this deeply, because too many live trapped inside emotional survival mode, where every interaction with a woman decides whether they have confidence or insecurity that day, and that is a dangerous way to live, because it hands another person complete control over your mental state, your focus, your direction, and your future. And this is exactly why Stoic discipline matters, because life becomes heavier the moment you allow emotions to lead your decisions instead of principles. And many men destroy themselves because they react emotionally every single time she becomes distant. They panic when her energy changes. They chase clarity from someone who already knows exactly what she is doing. They lose sleep trying to understand mixed signals while she calmly watches their emotional collapse from a distance. And the painful truth is, she often keeps testing because she wants to see whether you are centered or dependent, whether you can remain grounded under pressure, or whether your entire identity disappears the second she acts different. And this is why the strongest thing a man can do is build a life so meaningful that no woman becomes the center of his existence. Because once you become consumed by your mission, your health, your future, and your self-respect, something powerful happens inside you. You stop reacting to every little emotional shift. You stop begging for reassurance. You stop overthinking silence. And instead of chasing attention, you naturally attract respect, because there is calmness in a man who knows where he is going. There is strength in a man who enjoys his own company, and there is something unforgettable about a man who remains focused, even when she tries to pull his attention away from his purpose. And many men watching this are tired because they spend years giving their best energy to women who only appreciate them when they finally pull away. They sacrifice time, money, sleep, ambition, and dignity, hoping loyalty will be enough while she slowly loses attraction because deep down she wants to admire a man, not manage one emotionally. And this is why your life must become bigger than relationships, because the moment your purpose becomes your foundation, her behavior loses power over your emotions. And ironically, that is when she often starts paying attention again, because women are drawn toward men who are difficult to emotionally control, men who remain composed under pressure, men who have standards, structure, direction, and discipline. And no, this does not mean becoming cold or emotionless. It means understanding that your peace matters more than temporary validation. It means refusing to abandon yourself just because someone else changes their behavior. It means waking up every day with goals that exist, whether she texts you or not. And once a man reaches this level, something changes in his entire presence, because he speaks differently, moves differently, thinks differently, and women notice it immediately, because he no longer looks hungry for attention. He no longer looks desperate for approval, and instead he carries himself like a man who values his time, protects his energy, and refuses to hand his emotional stability to someone else ever again. That is exactly why so many men are changing their lives through the Stoic Relationship Blueprint ebook for men, linked in the comments, because it is filled with timeless Stoic principles that teach you how to master your emotions, rebuild your self-respect, stop depending on validation, and finally become the kind of man who moves through life with discipline, clarity, and inner strength, no matter who stays or leaves. And now for the first time the audiobook version is also available, so you can listen to this life-changing knowledge while walking, training, driving, or jogging, and slowly rebuild your mindset every single day until emotional weakness no longer controls your life. This is not temporary motivation that disappears after one night. This is wisdom that stays with you forever, because once you own the book, it is always yours to return to whenever life tests you again. And with the Stoic Relationship Blueprint course for men launching in the coming weeks, this is the perfect time to comment Blueprint below to get early access and start transforming your life before another year disappears, living the same emotional cycle that keeps so many men trapped. Number 2. He doesn't fear losing people. The moment a man stops fearing loss, he becomes dangerous in a way most women are not prepared for, because she can no longer manipulate him through distance, silence, mixed signals, or emotional confusion, since his mind no longer collapses every time someone threatens to leave his life. And this is the point many men never reach, because they spend years attaching their self-worth to who stays, who replies, who gives attention, and who chooses them, while living in constant anxiety that one wrong move might push someone away. And this fear quietly destroys them from the inside, because it forces them to tolerate disrespect, ignore red flags, overextend themselves emotionally, and shrink their standards just to keep someone around who is already showing signs of inconsistency. And women notice this immediately, because she studies emotional reactions more than words. She watches how quickly you panic when her energy changes, how fast you abandon your own boundaries to keep her comfortable, how easily she can pull your attention away from your purpose, and once she realizes you fear losing her more than you value yourself, the balance shifts completely, because now she understands that you are emotionally attached to an outcome, while she remains emotionally free to do whatever she wants. And this is exactly why so many men become trapped in painful situations where they give everything to women who give almost nothing back, because deep down they are terrified of being alone, terrified of starting over, terrified that they will never find someone else, and that fear controls every decision they make. But the truth many men avoid accepting is that people often treat you according to the level of emotional discipline you display, because when someone sees that you will stay, no matter how badly they behave, they stop respecting your presence, and this is why the ability to walk away peacefully without emotional collapse becomes one of the strongest forms of self-respect a man can develop, because it shows that your standards matter more than temporary attachment. And men need to understand something painful but necessary. She is not always testing whether you love her. Many times she is testing whether you love yourself, whether you can stay grounded when she becomes distant, whether you can maintain dignity when communication changes, whether you can continue focusing on your life instead of falling apart emotionally the second she withdraws attention. And sadly, many men fail these moments because instead of staying composed, they immediately seek reassurance. They demand explanations. They double text. They overanalyze. They beg for clarity. And in doing so, they reveal that their emotional stability depends entirely on her behavior. And once that happens, she unconsciously stops viewing him as strong, because strength is not loud aggression or fake confidence. Real strength is emotional control under pressure. Real strength is remaining centered when uncertainty appears. Real strength is refusing to lose yourself just because someone else changes their attitude toward you. And this is where Stoic thinking transforms a man's entire life, because he starts understanding that attachment creates suffering when it becomes dependency. He learns that not everything deserves a reaction. He realizes that peace comes from controlling his own mind instead of trying to control other people. And once this mindset develops, he stops living in emotional panic every time someone pulls away, because he understands a simple truth. Anyone willing to lose you was never fully yours to begin with. And instead of chasing people who are unsure about him, he begins investing energy into himself, his discipline, his future, his health, his purpose. And this changes his entire presence, because now he no longer acts from fear, he acts from clarity. And women notice this immediately, because calmness in a man is rare today, especially when emotions are involved. And the reason she cannot stop thinking about a man like this is because his behavior breaks expectations completely. She expects emotional reactions. She expects pleading. She expects him to become unstable when she becomes cold. But when he stays composed, continues building his life, and refuses to sacrifice his dignity just to keep access to her attention, she starts questioning everything, because now she cannot control the emotional direction anymore. And many men watching this know exactly how exhausting it feels to constantly worry about losing someone, because they spend entire nights checking their phone, replaying conversations, analyzing every small change in behavior, carrying emotional pressure silently while pretending they are fine, and slowly they lose confidence, focus, ambition, and peace, because their entire emotional state becomes attached to one person's approval. And this is why emotional detachment is not about becoming heartless. It is about becoming stable. It is about understanding that your life still has value even when someone leaves. It is about refusing to abandon your standards just because you fear loneliness. And once a man truly understands this, he becomes free in a way that changes everything, because he no longer begs to be chosen. He no longer tolerates disrespect just to avoid losing someone. He no longer sacrifices himself, trying to convince people of his worth. And ironically, this is when women often begin respecting him more, because she sees a man who is emotionally grounded, disciplined, and capable of walking away without destroying himself emotionally. And whether she admits it or not, that level of self-control is deeply attractive, because most men today are ruled by fear, fear of losing attention, fear of losing relationships, fear of being replaced, fear of being alone. and those fears silently control their decisions every single day. But the man who accepts loss without losing himself becomes different because his confidence no longer comes from external validation. It comes from knowing that no matter who stays or leaves, he still has himself, his purpose, his discipline, and his direction, and that kind of man moves through life with a level of peace and strength that very few people ever achieve. Number 3. He doesn't need constant attention. A man becomes impossible to control when his happiness no longer rises and falls based on her attention, because she immediately notices when she is no longer the center of his emotional world, and that changes the entire dynamic between them, since so many men today unknowingly train women to believe they can control them through inconsistency, delayed replies, mixed signals, and emotional distance, simply because they react to every little shift in energy as if their peace depends on keeping her interested at all times. And this is exactly why so many men lose themselves slowly without even realizing it. Because their day begins with checking whether she texted, their confidence depends on how affectionate she sounds, their focus disappears the second her energy changes, and before long they are mentally exhausted, trying to maintain access to someone who already knows she has emotional control over them, and she absolutely notices this because women pay close attention to emotional dependency. She watches how available you are, how quickly you reply, how desperately you try to keep conversations alive, how anxious you become when communication slows down. And once she sees that your emotional stability depends on her presence, she unconsciously stops valuing your attention, because people rarely respect what is constantly handed to them without restraint. And this is the painful truth many men avoid accepting, because they believe giving unlimited access proves loyalty, while she interprets it as emotional hunger. And the more emotionally hungry a man appears, the less mysterious he becomes, the less disciplined he appears, and the less respect she has for his time. Because in her mind, a man who constantly seeks validation from her has not yet mastered himself. And this is why attention becomes dangerous when it turns into dependency, because many men are not truly attached to the woman herself. They are attached to the emotional relief her attention temporarily gives them, and that is why they panic when she becomes distant, because they are losing their source of reassurance instead of standing firmly on their own emotional foundation. And this is exactly why discipline over the mind changes a man's entire life, because once you stop depending on attention to feel secure, you begin operating from strength instead of fear. You stop checking your phone every 5 minutes hoping for a message. You stop overanalyzing her tone. You stop creating imaginary problems inside your head every time she acts slightly different. And instead, you begin protecting your peace, like a man who finally understands his value. And this mindset completely changes how women respond to you. Because calmness in a man is rare, especially when emotions are involved, and she becomes confused when you no longer react the way other men do. Because she expects emotional chasing. She expects over-pursuing. She expects panic the second she pulls back. But instead, she sees a man continuing to focus on his goals, continuing to improve himself, continuing to live his life with structure and purpose regardless of her behavior. And that immediately separates you from the endless crowd of men who lose themselves emotionally over every woman who gives them temporary attention. And many men watching this right now understand exactly how draining it feels to constantly seek reassurance from someone who becomes colder the more effort you give, because they spend weeks trying to fix situations that only damage their self-respect further. They keep sending messages, trying to revive dying energy. They keep tolerating confusion because they are scared to lose access to her. And all the while she slowly loses admiration, because deep down women are drawn toward emotional stability, not emotional dependence. And this is why Stoic discipline matters so deeply in relationships, because it teaches a man to remain grounded regardless of external circumstances. It teaches him that peace comes from mastering his reactions instead of controlling people. And once a man applies this properly, he stops allowing attention to dictate his emotional state, because he finally understands that someone else's inconsistency should never have the power to destroy his focus, his confidence, or his direction in life. And this creates something powerful inside him, because now he no longer enters interactions desperate to be chosen. He enters them from a place of self-respect and abundance. And ironically, this is when women often become more emotionally invested, because there is something deeply attractive about a man who enjoys connection without becoming consumed by it, a man who appreciates her presence without depending on it for his happiness, a man who can walk away from his phone, focus on his purpose, and continue living fully whether she responds or not. And many men never experience this freedom because they spend years trapped inside emotional addiction, where every small amount of female attention becomes a temporary escape from insecurity, loneliness, boredom, and lack of direction. But the solution is not becoming cold, arrogant, or emotionally numb. The solution is building a life so meaningful that attention becomes a bonus instead of a necessity. And once a man reaches this level, he naturally becomes calmer, sharper, more disciplined, and more attractive, because his energy no longer screams desperation. It speaks confidence quietly through his actions, and women notice this immediately because she senses that this man is emotionally centered, that he values his time, that he does not abandon his priorities just because she appears, and this forces her to see him differently, because now she cannot easily manipulate his emotions through inconsistency anymore. And this is where many men finally wake up, because they realize how much life they wasted obsessing over attention from women who gave them the bare minimum while ignoring their own goals, health, finances, peace, and purpose in the process. And the painful reality is many women lose respect for men who constantly seek validation, because dependency removes mystery and emotional strength from a man's presence, while discipline, calmness, and self-control create curiosity and admiration naturally. And this is why the strongest thing you can do is stop allowing attention to decide your worth, because the more complete your life becomes without needing constant reassurance, the more powerful your presence becomes in every area of life, not just relationships. Because now people sense that your peace cannot be controlled easily, your confidence cannot be shaken by silence, and your direction cannot be interrupted by emotional games. And once you truly understand this, you stop chasing temporary validation and begin building permanent self-respect. And that transformation changes everything about the way you think, move, speak, and live. Number 4. He walks away without drama. Nothing unsettles a woman more than a man who quietly removes himself without begging, arguing, or trying to force her to stay, because she expects emotional reactions when she changes her behavior. She expects confusion, pleading, emotional conversations, long messages, and endless attempts to repair things even when she is the one creating distance. And this is exactly why so many men lose themselves emotionally, because instead of protecting their dignity, they become obsessed with fixing someone who already made her decision through her actions long before she ever says it with words. And this painful cycle destroys countless men slowly because they ignore disrespect, hoping things will improve. They tolerate cold behavior because they fear losing her. They keep over-explaining themselves, trying to be understood by someone who no longer values their presence. And every time they abandon their standards to keep her around, they lose another piece of themselves internally, while she loses more respect for them externally. And this is the harsh reality many men avoid accepting, because they still believe loyalty means staying no matter how badly they are treated. But real strength is knowing when your peace matters more than your attachment, And women absolutely test this, whether men want to admit it or not, because she watches how much disrespect you tolerate before you finally stand up for yourself. She watches whether your standards disappear. The second emotions become involved. She watches whether you remain composed under pressure or emotionally collapse, trying to keep access to her attention. And many men fail these moments because they fear loneliness more than they value dignity. So instead of walking away calmly, they become emotional, reactive, and desperate for closure, while she quietly loses admiration, watching them abandon all self-control just to avoid being left behind. And this is exactly why the ability to leave peacefully becomes one of the rarest and most powerful traits a man can develop, because it proves he values himself enough to remove his presence from situations that destroy his peace. And no, this does not mean acting cold or hateful. It means understanding that self-respect must come before attachment, because once a man keeps tolerating behavior that drains his spirit simply to avoid losing someone, he slowly teaches himself that his needs, boundaries, and emotional well-being matter less than keeping another person comfortable. And many men watching this right now know exactly what that pain looks like, because they stay too long hoping she will change. They replay old memories, trying to hold on to the version of her that existed in the beginning. They ignore obvious signs because they are emotionally invested, and every single day they become more mentally exhausted, trying to force connection where consistency no longer exists. And this is where Stoic discipline changes everything, because it teaches a man to accept reality instead of fighting against it emotionally. It teaches him to observe actions instead of clinging to words. And once he learns this, he stops wasting years trying to convince people to value him properly, because he finally understands that genuine respect never needs to be begged for repeatedly. And women notice this shift immediately, because a man who can leave quietly without emotional chaos becomes extremely difficult to manipulate, since his peace no longer depends on keeping someone in his life at all costs. And this deeply unsettles her because she expects emotional attachment to overpower your self-control. She expects you to sacrifice your dignity to maintain access to her, but instead she watches you remain calm, grounded, and disciplined enough to remove yourself from situations that no longer align with your standards. And this creates something powerful, because now she cannot predict your reactions anymore. She cannot rely on emotional dependency to keep you available, and for the first time, she realizes you are capable of living fully without her. And this is where many men finally begin transforming, because they understand that walking away is not weakness. It is often the first act of real self-respect they have shown themselves in years. And yes, it hurts at first because attachment creates emotional weight, especially when you invested deeply into someone. But suffering grows far worse when you continue staying where your presence is no longer valued properly, and countless men destroy their confidence trying to earn consistency from women who only give attention when it benefits them emotionally. Women who disappear when accountability appears. Women who expect endless understanding while offering very little in return. And the painful truth is, some women will absolutely continue using a man emotionally for attention, validation, comfort, and reassurance, as long as he keeps allowing it. Which is why boundaries matter so deeply, because people rarely stop behavior that continues rewarding them. And once a man finally understands this, he stops negotiating his self-respect for temporary companionship. He stops explaining his value repeatedly. He stops trying to force emotional investment from someone who remains inconsistent, and instead he begins protecting his energy with discipline and clarity. And this changes his entire life, because now he walks differently, thinks differently, and carries himself differently, since his confidence no longer comes from being chosen by someone else. It comes from choosing himself every single day. And ironically, this is often when women begin respecting him more, because she sees a man who refuses to betray himself emotionally just to avoid losing her, a man who values peace over chaos, purpose over emotional confusion, and dignity over temporary attachment, and whether she admits it or not, that kind of emotional strength is unforgettable, because so few men today possess the discipline to leave situations that slowly destroy them internally. And once you truly master this, your entire reality changes, because you stop fearing endings, you stop tolerating disrespect, and you stop abandoning yourself trying to hold on to people who already decided through their actions that they no longer deserve access to your time, energy, and presence. The truth is, they profit from emotionally weak men, distracted men, dependent men, men who never learn discipline, self-respect, and emotional control, which is exactly why the Stoic Relationship Blueprint ebook for men is changing lives right now, because it is filled with timeless Stoic principles that immediately reshape the way you think, move, and live as a man. And now the audiobook version is finally available, so you can absorb this life-changing knowledge while walking, training, driving, or jogging every single day. And once you own it, this wisdom stays with you forever whenever life tries to break your focus again. The Stoic Relationship Blueprint course for men is also launching in the coming weeks for those ready to go even deeper, so comment "I choose myself" below if you are ready to take control of your life, rebuild your mindset, and finally stop living for validation, because this knowledge was never meant to reach men who refuse to stay controlled. Like this video and subscribe right now to help more men wake up before they waste more years chasing attention, losing themselves emotionally.